Ooh. The girl in the back. Come here. Now. The words cut through the theater like a blade. 500 people turned at once. Cameras tightened their focus. Under the lights, an 11-year-old black girl froze. Her heart hammering as a famous singer's hand closed around her shoulder and pulled her into the spotlight. His smile looked kind from far away. Close it wasn't. Let's see if you can actually sing, he said, voice smooth, almost playful. Then lower, meant only for her but caught by the mic. Fail quietly. The band struck the first chord. The note he pointed to was the one that made him rich. The note everyone believed only he could hit. He expected her voice to crack. He expected laughter. He expected the room to side with power, money, reputation. What he didn't expect was the way her hands stopped shaking. What he didn't expect was her lifting her chin and asking one simple question that made the entire theater go silent. In that pause, between arrogance and truth, everything began to unravel. Stay with this story to see how one child's voice exposed a lie worth millions, and why the people watching realized too late they were witnessing the end of a legend. Like the video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales, because stories this real deserve to be heard all the way through. The first note hadn't even begun when the stage lights shifted, washing Zara in a harsh white beam that made her eyes sting. She felt the smooth lacquered floor under her shoes and heard the low murmur of the crowd. Confused, expectant, hungry for drama they didn't yet understand. Chase stood beside her with the confidence of a man who believed the world existed to applaud him. His breath brushed her ear as he leaned in again. "Don't drag this out," he whispered. "Sing. Or fall." Zara swallowed hard. The microphone trembled in her hand, not from weakness, but from the shock of being shoved into a moment she didn't choose. Behind her, the other kids from her choir stood frozen on the risers. None dared to move. Ms. Johnson pressed a hand to her chest, helpless to intervene. One wrong move would cost the event its fragile order. The band began the intro to Higher Ground. The bass rolled like distant thunder. The drummer tapped lightly, giving her just enough rhythm to enter if she dared. Chase stepped back, folding his arms, offering the world a smile so polished it belonged in a magazine. "Go on, sweetheart," he said loudly. "Give everyone a show." Zara didn't sing. Instead, she looked straight at him and asked, her voice soft but steady, "Mr. Hendricks, why won't you sing it first?" The question wasn't loud. But it didn't have to be. The room tightened like rope. Chase blinked, caught off guard. He glanced at the audience, then back at her, then tried to laugh it off. "You want me to audition for you?" "No," Zara said. "I just want to hear how you hit the high note. Without the track." A ripple tore through the audience. People leaned forward. Phones rose discreetly. A judge in the front row slowly sat up straighter. And Chase's smile cracked. He snapped at the sound engineer. "Track off. Now." The band stopped. The theater sank into a hollow silence. Zara waited, her small hands clasped behind her back like she was waiting for a school lesson to begin. Chase lifted the mic, inhaled, and reached for the note that made him famous. The sound that came out wasn't a note. It was a scrape, thin, strained, breaking before it even rose. The audience winced together. The failure echoed through the theater like something collapsing. He tried again. Harder. Carotid veins tightening, shoulders lifting, voice shattering mid-climb. A gasp rolled through the room before Chase shoved the microphone away and muttered something about a dry throat. Zara didn't gloat. She simply said, "That wasn't C6. The crowd erupted, not loud but sharp, like 1,000 whispered sparks catching fire at once. Chase's face drained. He stepped toward her, fury flickering beneath his eyes, but before he could hiss another threat, a man stepped out of the wings. Chase's own sound engineer. "She's right," the man said. "You haven't hit that note live in 15 years. A single sentence, delivered calmly, but it detonated the room. Chase turned on him like an animal cornered. "You're fired." "I know," the engineer said. "But she's a kid. And she has more courage than all of us." Phones were out now. Every angle captured. Every breath recorded. Chase knew it. He felt the shift, the way power was sliding out of his hands and into hers. He tried one last time to control the narrative. "Sing it then," he snarled. "Let's see if you're anything but a loud mouth." Zara took a breath. She heard her grandmother's voice from that morning. "If someone tries to shrink you, stand taller." She nodded to the band. When she sang, the theater changed. Her voice glided through the first verse, soft, almost fragile, but the strength beneath it grew like a rising tide. People leaned forward instinctively. When she entered the pre-chorus, the sound sharpened, bloomed, filled every corner of the hall. No fear. No hesitation. By the time she reached the bridge, Chase was pale. 5. 5. B5. Her voice soared, effortless. Then she aimed for the note he couldn't reach. G6. It rang like crystal. Pure. Bright. Strong. A note that didn't just sit in the air. It claimed the air. She held it, sustained it, shaped it. Then she climbed higher. Notes he'd never touched on any track he'd ever claimed as his own. When the final chorus ended, silence fell for half a heartbeat. Then the theater exploded. Standing ovation. Cheering. Cheers. Cameras flashing like lightning. Zara stood in the middle of it all, breathless, overwhelmed but unbroken. Chase Hendricks was no longer the center of the room. She was. But the story didn't end on that stage. Hours later, the theater's back rooms turned into a battlefield. Chase's lawyer arrived with a contract designed to crush her. A forced confession. Fake apology. $50,000 dangled like bait. Implied threats whispered beneath legal language. Funding pulled, lawsuits filed, families ruined. Zara refused. And the cost came fast. Reporters at her school. Angry fans outside her apartment. Fake stories about her family circulating online. Threatening calls from blocked numbers. She read comments that no child should ever read. She watched her mother's hands shake at the kitchen table. She listened as her principal apologized for a suspension he never wanted to give. Every peak of hope was followed by a plunge into fear, confusion, and helplessness. But the wave didn't end there. Help came. First, from Sophia Mitchell, the real voice behind Chase's high notes, posting a video exposing the truth with her contract in hand. Then more session singers. Then producers. Then parents from her school. Then artists with global audiences. And finally, an attorney who offered to defend Zara for free. Bit by bit, the tide began to turn. Chase tried to regain control through a $10 million lawsuit. He tried to weaponize the system he'd always used to silence others. But the more he fought, the more truth surfaced. And then the courtroom hearing arrived. Zara sat in her white blouse, legs dangling, her mother holding her hand. Chase sat surrounded by lawyers, performing dignity like he performed everything else. When the judge asked if he could sing the note he built his career on, he refused. Not because he didn't want to, because he couldn't. The judge denied his injunction, sanctioned him for intimidation, declared Zara's words protected truth. The crowd outside the courthouse cheered for her the way they once cheered for him. But his punishment wasn't complete. The truth spread like wildfire. Sponsors dropped him. His label terminated his contract. Venues canceled shows. Old fans walked away. New investigations surfaced. Magazine headlines turned brutal. Within months, he wasn't a star. He was a cautionary tale. Bankruptcy filings. Grammys revoked. Assets frozen. His mansion sold at auction. His online comeback tour attended by barely anyone. The man who once dragged a child into a spotlight to humiliate her now filmed low-quality tutorials in a rented studio where the echo gave away the emptiness of the room. Meanwhile, Zara rose, not as a manufactured star, but as a truth-teller. She signed with an independent label that protected her childhood and her future. She created a scholarship fund for underprivileged singers. She rebuilt her school's music program with community support. She stood beside the session singers who once lived in shadows and now stepped into recognition. And the world listened. Because the girl he tried to break became the girl who broke the silence for thousands. By the time she performed at the Grammys a year later, her voice steady, clear, luminous. One camera briefly cut to a small, blurry live stream playing on a dusty laptop somewhere. Chase watching from the background of a forgotten office. His expression hollow as the child he once tried to crush received a standing ovation from the industry he no longer belonged to. He couldn't stop watching. He couldn't look away. Because her voice, her real voice, was everything he pretended to be. And that was the consequence he never escaped. Her truth outlived his fame. And the world finally saw who he truly was. When the noise around the scandal finally faded, Zara found herself back in the small church where she'd first learned to sing. No cameras, no stage lights, just wooden pews, soft echoes, and the warmth of people who knew her before the world ever tried to define her. She stood near the front, tracing the edge of the old piano, realizing how far a single moment of honesty had carried her, farther than fear ever could. Her mother watched from the doorway, tired but proud in a way that needed no words. Ms. Johnson sat nearby, humming along as Zara tested a new melody she'd written, one built not from perfection but from truth. It felt different now. Freer, stronger, unburdened. She wasn't the girl who'd been dragged under the spotlight anymore. She was someone who chose where to stand. And somewhere on the other side of the city, a man who once believed he controlled every room sat alone in an empty rehearsal studio, listening to the faint echo of a voice that no longer belonged to him, realizing it never had. Zara closed the piano lid gently, letting the final note linger. It wasn't a victory lap. It was a reminder. Even the smallest voice can open a door that power tried to keep shut. If this story moved you, help it reach someone who needs to hear it. Like the video, share it, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales so we can keep bringing real, meaningful stories to life.